Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and I want to review the last few episodes of Season 1 of Raised by Wolves. And I will give a spoiler warning before I go into the details, but in general I think I can say that episodes 8 and 9 were pretty good, probably higher than average for this show. But the last episode was mostly boring, and only in the last 15 minutes they suddenly started cramming in everything in a hurry. And this was the same problem I had with a lot of other episodes and this whole season in general. In a lot of places it felt dragged out and boring with not a lot of things happening, and yet other things that could have been interesting were kind of rushed and done too quickly without exploiting the potential well. And I had a similar problem in the very last episode, that most of the episode was kind of boring, and only in the last 15 minutes they're suddenly in a hurry to finish everything and also to introduce brand new things for the next season. So I was kind of annoyed at how rushed all of it was done. And another problem I had, that they didn't answer any of the questions that we have from watching this season. There's a lot of mystery, a lot of mystery boxes, even literal mystery boxes lying out in the desert, for example, and all kinds of things like that, and none of them were explained. We don't get any answers for anything. None of the unanswered questions were answered, not a single one, and they only introduced new questions. They introduced a bunch of new things in the very last few minutes for the next season to explore, but they didn't even answer the previous ones, and so that's why I found the season final kind of annoying. But I guess it depends on where they go with it. If the next season will be amazing, maybe it will be worth it to have this setup and to delay answering all the questions if they will be answered later. I'm really hoping it's not going to be, like Lost and all those kinds of shows with mystery boxes which never get answered in a satisfactory way, and so that's my concern. So that's why I don't even know if I even recommend this season to anyone, because even though we did have very good specific scenes and a lot of good moments and some good ideas, but also a lot of boring stuff and a lot of mystery boxes which still have not yet been answered, and all kinds of silly things, and so I'm not even sure I would recommend the show, but it all depends on where the show will go next. If the next season will be so good and it will be worthwhile to wait for the answers, then I'll be okay with that. So it all depends. So that's really all I can say without spoilers. So now I will go into the details. So in episode 8 we find out that the mother android is pregnant because she mated with her creator in episode 7. That was one of the good artistic scenes that I was talking about in my previous review. The way it was shown inside that simulation was very visually interesting. And now we find out that she's pregnant, presumably with some kind of a hybrid between an android and a human. That's what I thought, at least initially. And the episodes started to kind of directly deal with all the build-up, all the drama, all the clashes between characters. All of that started to kind of reaching a boiling point. And we also had a bunch of funny references to Star Trek. For example, there were a few scenes in which a character said, "I'm a doctor, not a something," and there was an android character who is a doctor, kind of like the EMH and all of that. So I enjoyed those little kind of references to Star Trek. And then in episode 9 they had kind of a visual reference to something from Lord of the Rings, namely that Witch King and the way he died in the last movie of Lord of the Rings, in the Return of the King. They had a character in this show who is a rapist, who always wore that kind of a prison helmet on him, which is supposed to protect others from him. If he tries to escape, his helmet is supposed to crush his face, and it has the spikes on it. And right from the beginning, when I first saw him, I thought kind of it's similar to Lord of the Rings. And the way that Witch King died in the end was also similar, because he kind of got crushed into himself and all of that. So they did kind of a visual similarity, which I guess is deliberate. I don't think it's a coincidence. And that character was kind of interesting as a villain, and I feel there was a missed opportunity. Like they could have done a lot more with that character, and yet it felt kind of rushed, because the way they introduced him and the way they kind of showed him in episode 9, when that girl meets him inside that crashed ark, and in the dark corridors, and suddenly she hears his voice, and he has kind of a creepy voice, and the way he turns around from the shadows, it all looked very kind of creepy in a good way. Like I enjoyed like the horror element of it. But then they kind of killed him off too easily in the end, and his helmet crushed his head, just like the Witch King, and so I kind of found that funny that it was so visually similar. By the way, I made videos of all of this on my other channel. I showed all the comparison clips with all the visual similarities. And also there's a lot of similarities to the Alien franchise, because the androids have white blood. And in the last episode of this season, we also had a bunch of similarities to the Prometheus prequels, because we find out there are some kind of people living on this planet who looked kind of similar to those engineers from Prometheus. And in one scene we saw a mask very similar to the space jockey look, with kind of a long nose and all of that. So there's a lot of kind of visual similarities. And of course in the very end, and this is big spoilers, I told you the mother android was pregnant, and we assumed that it's some sort of human android hybrid, but instead it's some sort of serpent, it's some sort of monster, and the way it gets out of her is very similar to the Alien movies. Like at first we see her belly is kind of almost bursting open, and then it kind of crawls inside her, and then it comes out of her mouth in a very bloody way and all of that. So a lot of visual similarities to Alien, and some people even speculate that maybe all of this is in the same universe as the Alien universe. I don't really think so, because there's too many contradictions. For example, in the Alien universe we never heard anything about humanity being religious and all of that, so all those elements were missing. Even though, in Alien 4, in the full version of that movie, we did see that Earth was destroyed in the director's cut, and so maybe we can actually fit this show somewhere in the Alien universe. We can simply say that war happened somewhere after the second movie and before the fourth movie, and so technically maybe we can fit it all together, and the androids having white blood and all of that obviously is very similar. And now we have monsters coming out of people, and it first comes out of her mouth, almost looking like the double mouth of the alien xenomorph and all of that. So obviously a lot of visual similarities, and the Prometheus aliens and that mask we saw and all of that is very similar, but maybe it's simply because, Ridley Scott is involved with this show, so maybe he's simply recycling some of the same ideas that he likes and all of that, even though he's not really the writer, but maybe he agreed to be part of this because he enjoys those kinds of ideas. Or maybe it was kind of a deliberate reference, just like they did the references to Star Trek and to Lord of the Rings. Maybe this is another kind of deliberate reference to do something similar. And part of me kind of wishes that they would tie it with the Alien universe, because that will make it all much more interesting. But that monster that came out of her, which looks like a giant snake basically, which is also able to fly because it's part robotic and it has the abilities of Mother, and so that's why it flies. And so it's not really like a xenomorph. The xenomorph was not that advanced, so I don't think it fits together. I did like how they foreshadowed it. They had a scene when the kid went into some kind of cave and he saw the paintings of some prophecies from the past, and it showed that the giant snake flying and all of that. So I do like it that they foreshadowed it a little bit, but it still felt kind of rushed. It was all only in the last episode, and we still have a bunch of unanswered questions, like how did that kid know the things he knew? Like, is the soul real? Who is the one? Who is that voice that is talking to everyone and influencing all of it? I wish we got some sort of explanation, or at least a suggestion of an explanation, like if one of the characters would theorize what that could be. Maybe some kind of robotic influence, some kind of hologram, some kind of AI doing all of that and transmitting messages into people's heads and all of that. I wish we would have at least gotten some kind of, someone implying a possible explanation. But we got absolutely nothing. Nothing at all was answered, and they just raised a bunch of new questions, and they showed another ship arriving to this planet, so presumably we'll get a bunch of new characters in the next season. And that guy who became religious basically went totally nuts, and so he kind of became a one-dimensional character, and that's no longer interesting. He was an interesting character when he was conflicted, when he didn't know what's going on, he didn't know what to do, he was in battle with himself, with his beliefs. He was a complex character, but now they basically turned him into a one-dimensional monster. He simply wants to, to be the king of this planet, to be a dictator, and that's it. And that's kind of boring, so I think they kind of ruined his character. He's no longer interesting, and that kid with the mouse became annoying. Suddenly he finds out things that no one told him, presumably from Soul or from whatever is pretending to be Soul, and then he shoots his fake mother and all of that. And so I wish it would have done better. Like, I thought the potential was there to have a lot of drama. I think maybe the mother should have told it to him herself, and then it would be more interesting. And instead he just suddenly finds out, so it's like they were in a hurry to wrap everything up, at least some of the things, and they introduced a bunch of new things. And they also had a fake death when the two androids were sacrificing themselves to kill that creature, but then it's revealed that they didn't die, they simply arrived to the other side of the planet. So I thought that was kind of, I don't like fake deaths, I don't like, emotional manipulation. So they pretended, they made us kind of, because we did care for these characters, were interesting, and for a moment I thought, wow, this show is taking a huge risk, kind of getting rid of some of the interesting characters like this. But then no, it was just a fake death, so everything is fine. So I didn't really like that. I did enjoy like the banter between the two androids. From the very beginning of the show, I kind of liked the father android because he was that kind of lovable android, the one who is kind of totally selfless and nice and trying to be charismatic, trying to be funny, trying to understand humor. And also he has a touch of those kinds of aliens I always liked in science fiction shows, kind of like, Teal'c in Stargate or Bortus and Clyden in the Orville. And in the last episode when he had that banter with Mother, that suddenly he has emotions and he feels offended, and the way he talks kind of in a very kind of robotic way, it kind of reminds me of those clashes between Bortus and Clyden on the Orville and all of that, so I found that kind of funny. So I enjoyed those moments, even though it's kind of a soap opera stuff, but the acting was really good, and so I enjoyed that. So they had a fake death of those characters in the end, and they finally did something with those giant pits, that it's revealed that they go all the way down to the core of the planet, and so I found that interesting, but was that only there just for this final scene in this episode in which they're flying down there to sacrifice themselves and somehow miraculously survive? I guess that snake maybe protected the ship somehow, and then the snake arrives to the other side of the planet in the tropical zone, so I guess we'll see more of that in the next season. And that's something I wanted this show to do, to show us more locations on the planet, to show a bigger variety of places and not just the same places again and again. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the next season. It might be good, but this season was far from perfect. It had a lot of boring stuff, it had a lot of silly stuff, and a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of mystery boxes which were not answered and maybe never will be answered, and I find that kind of annoying. I would be fine with an ambiguous answer, meaning not a 100% answer, but just raising possibilities, just hearing some possible theories to explain that, and then we the fans can debate what makes sense or not, but we got absolutely nothing. So it's as if the writers themselves don't really know the answers, and that I find annoying. And that snake alien kind of looks kind of silly, like it just looks like a giant flying snake. And I think they should have done a better design, like design an actual alien creature which would look creepy and interesting and something new. Maybe they went with the snake because this way they cannot be sued, because it's just similar to a real life animal which is not copyrightable, and so that way anyone can do it and no one can sue it. So maybe that's why they went with this simple design. But I would have much preferred if they invented something new, something creepy, something we didn't see before. Then I would have given these extra points, but instead we just have a giant flying snake, which maybe it's symbolism with the Bible and all of that, because a lot of stuff in this season was about religion and all kinds of symbolism, all kinds of things similar to religion. And the way that Mother was behaving as if she became religious when she started to believe in her creator, that he loves her and all of that, and started talking almost like she has her own religion. So I guess that was a clever parallel with the religious guys that she's against and all of that. So that was kind of interesting, and the way they showed the prophecies and all of that. And I think in one of the paintings in the cave they even showed that pod with the two androids. So maybe they went with the snake design simply because it's kind of a religious symbolic thing, so maybe that's why. But I wonder what the hell will they be doing with that thing in the next season. Like what, it will just be a giant flying snake that wants to do what? Like I really wonder what they'll do with that in the next season, so I guess I'll keep watching. So that's really all I had to say about that. So the final episode, I would rank it lower than average because first of all most of it was boring and a lot of silly stuff, and nothing was answered, and just randomly introduced a bunch of new things for the next season without explaining anything. And the whole thing with the engineer looking humanoids, which reminds me of Prometheus, and also they made that similar kind of ancient alien theory that maybe humans came from this planet because it had humans in the far past which were similar to the Earth humans, and so it kind of reminds me of Prometheus. The aliens that are violently bursting out of people's bodies, and the whole thing with pregnancy and all of that, that was also a big deal in Prometheus, that she was told that she's pregnant and then she gives birth to a monster basically. So that's the same kind of thing happened here. So Mother thought she's going to give birth to some beautiful baby, half android, half human, and instead it's some sort of monster. So that's just like Prometheus. And that's why a lot of people are speculating that maybe all of this is somehow connected, which I don't really think. I simply think it was kind of a visual reference, just like the other references to other things they did. And so I wish this show would have been more original. I would have preferred if they did new things that were never seen before and not just recycling ideas we saw in other movies and other shows. So that's my opinions for now. Let me know what you think and we can continue the discussion in the comment section below. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.